The young folks aren't aware of the history of how we got there. The reason that we fought 30 years, 40 years for Parliament. There are some unsung heroes. It's the families behind the men and women who are up front. That's where the sacrifice is made.
Welcome to a new series of conversations with Bermuda's former premiers. Over the next several months, we will be talking with the government leaders. Today, we welcome former Premier Alex Scott, CBE. Premier Scott served in that capacity for 3 years, although his political career spans more than 4 decades. He's a gentle giant, a warrior, a humble visionary servant leader. And so we are happy to welcome Premier Scott to have a chat with us today. We will be focusing on his tenure as Premier of Bermuda. Welcome, Premier Scott, and thank you for coming.
Heather, it's an honor to be here. And I guess at my age, it's wonderful to be anywhere.
Yes, indeed. You are absolutely right. Now, I recall reading that one of the hallmarks for you as Premier was your social agenda. Tell us about that.
It was a natural fit. If you know the Progressive Labor Party, as a communications individual, professional, I put it this way: the haves can continue to have, but the have-nots must have more. And out of that came the concept for social agenda. We canvassed all the members of the cabinet in one of our early sessions and said, what would you wish? No, what do you think the community needs most when it comes to policy initiatives that will work for this community? And each cabinet minister was required to go away and come back with a response to that question. 65 different areas of endeavor came back, and out of that came the social agenda. Seniors, sustainable development, obviously education, obviously entrepreneurial needs. And in actual fact, it was structured so that it went across the broad spectrum of the entire community. And in that way, we felt we could begin to empower the have-nots and sustain the economy for the haves. So in a nutshell, that was it.
So, Premier, with the social agenda, what challenges did you face in trying to implement such a very robust and huge program?
Good question. Plans can be a dime a dozen, but the execution of a plan is the determination as to whether it remains a piece of paper or it becomes an active, living policy. And this is where we engage the civil service. Every initiative of the 65 was assigned to an area in government. Heads of those departments, PS and directors, all then had to come back with their interpretation, the technical points for executing that plan. And it worked in several ways. It brought us, cabinet, closer to the civil service in the integrity, my language, of carrying out a plan. And it gave the civil service something to work to. They didn't just sit there and say, what does minister want us to do? They had literally a blueprint for going forward. And in that way, I think we got off the ground quickly. Every month we would review with the heads of the various departments, the ministers. It became, for all intents and purposes, a win-win for all in the execution. Even now, I hear on occasions that the civil service felt comfortable with that type of approach to policy, what they had to do. They knew what to work to rather than what happens next.
Right. I appreciate that in my former life, absolutely. And while you're saying that, that caused me to reflect on something you had said years ago about the importance of a good relationship, a good working relationship with the civil service, with the technical officers. Do you wish to elaborate on that?
It's mandatory. Unfortunately, on occasions, ministers and government members, it becomes an us and them. No, it's us. If you're going to execute a policy, you need the technical officers. We are sitting here at the Barclay Institute. It was one of the projects that I started as minister, saw through as premier. And I remember one of my colleagues saying, I disagree with what's happening at the Barclay. I simplify it. I've built 4 or 5 houses, and this is what we should do. I said, wait. We set policy. The civil service guides and advises us on how we do it technically. Your 5 houses, quite an accomplishment. But we're about to put a mammoth on that site, and we need to have expertise beyond both you and I. He said, well, who's in charge? I mean, are we in charge or is the civil service? I said, they advise and we decide. With that marriage between the management components, if I can put it that way, you not only make progress, but you engender respect between the civil service and yourselves. Couldn't do it. When I walked in Works and Engineering, I knew in a moment 500 members of Works and Engineering certainly couldn't be ignored. And I could benefit if we worked together. There's the notion that good ministers, good policymakers, it is helpful if they play team sports as youngsters. The concept of working as a team makes for good management. You have a star in a team, but it was a team that wins. And in the case of government, in case of my experience as premier, I found that it is better to work with than have the concept that it's an us and them.
That, Premier, is a very laudable and commendable attitude, the one of collaboration and working with, rather than it being us and them. Thank you for sharing that nugget of wisdom. You've had other successes while you've been premier. You mentioned the Barclay Institute as one of your initiatives. You started as Minister of Works, but it was completed during your premiership as premier. Are there other success stories that you want to share with us during your time as premier?
We're using one of them right now, CITV.
Yes,
and the notion of the need to communicate with the community that you serve, fundamental. At the time, the director was Miss Beverly Lottymore. The cabinet office, the physical cabinet office, not the cabinet, are very territorial. And they didn't wish to have her, as I envisioned, work as one of my immediate advisors. And I made the point out to them that I rather have a communications expert advise me than an accountant. The concept that government is a business works, but government's business is communicating policy and initiatives and what you intend with the people that you serve. I tell my son, who is now in government, take care of your constituency and your constituency will take care of you. As a premier and as cabinet, it was mandatory, in my view, that we keep the communication links open. CITV was a natural fit. We located it here at Berkeley, and this is one of my failings, because I anticipated and would like to have had part of Berkeley's curriculum include the fundamentals of journalism, and they could literally walk across the hall into CITV and have practical experience. But the events of politics overtook me. That's a nice way of saying I was defeated at the next leadership party event.
But that shows that you are a visionary leader, looking at wanting to infuse students learning about communications with CITV. That's a brilliant idea, Premier. Brilliant idea.
It's sitting somewhere in a dusty file.
Now, you talk about the importance of communication.
Yes.
How does Patty help with that?
Complements it. Public access to information, again, to my way of thinking, fundamental. The umbrella approach I brought to the office of Premier was that we serve the public. So therefore, the archives, information, is really public property. We are the keepers of the archive. We manage the archives. We utilize the information. But that information should be available to the public. Right now, there's a case going on that underscores this principle, the serious nature of the principle, in that the head of Patty is in court challenging the Attorney General's office about information about a case. The Director of Public Information, Patty, is saying the public has a right to know. The AG is saying elements in this case should not be made public. In my view, I don't know if the legislation is involved. The Patty director is correct. She should push and advocate for the public because that's their information. And so it's not just the public should know general news items and the information that is available to everyone. There is a fundamental precept in a democracy that the populace, the people, have their rights. And as government agent, as a premier, I had a responsibility to honor those rights. So there was Patty, there was the Ombudsman's office, there was sustainable development, there was independence. All of them are from the same tree. All of them are aimed at the empowerment of the public. And this comes right out of the PLP. I was retained as a PR consultant to a fledgling PLP in the late 60s and 70s. And Mrs. Brown Evans, then, before she was Dame, if you asked Mrs. Brown Evans a question in CC, that turned into a lecture that went on and on and on. And we said, oh, gee, Brown Evans. But once I became premier, once I became a minister, I appreciated it. It was the guidelines from which I followed. It was the principles of governance. And that's why Patty, Ombudsman, social agenda, all of them became natural to me. I feel that we may be losing some of that. I think the government may be slipping back into an us and them. And if you lose that communication link, you lose the respect of the public you serve, and then you can lose the government.
Well said, well said. Not just does it engender a sense of respect between the government and the people, it also fosters trust, which communications, good communications, does. Tell us a little bit more about your other successes.
I guess they began, if I can put it this way, my entree into the office of Premier. I had absolutely no intention of being Premier. I had absolutely no intention of being a member of Parliament. I signed on because my friend Fred Wade, we went to Berkeley together. We went away to university. We would drive taxis during the summer to get tuition for the going back. And he started telling me about politics while I wanted to talk about girls and beach parties. Once we returned from university, I set up a business, a public relations advertising business. And one day I saw Fred at ZFB having, I thought, a difficult time getting across a point. And I said, listen, anytime you want to help, I'm available. And shortly thereafter, the phone rang. And out of that, I evolved from PR. The position as public relations consultant, my definition, I'd sit in PLP meetings and then advise the leadership because they were a fledgling party. I would sit in PLP meetings, listen to them, take copious notes, and then say, based on these notes, based on what the party's saying, based on your intentions, I would suggest that you do A, B, C, and D, because you're trying to win over the public. I felt there was a UBP sound barrier. That is, the UBP had the ability to reach out and impress the general public. So therefore, the PLP, if they were to be successful, had to establish, here it goes again, that communication link. Fast forward to 2003, and the PR consultant that I was had become a senator. So now I'm getting into retail politics, and then we have a challenge from within. You have the Brown faction challenging the Smith faction, and out of it came a compromise leader, Alex Scott. Just because I was known to the party as a problem solver for the party, political problem solver. So therefore, when they really were at sixes and sevens, the challenge between these two factions, after winning an election, I was called upon by the party parliamentary group to step in. And I'd say that was a win. That was one of the most important services that I provided both to the party and I would like to think the country, is that we saved the PLP at a very precarious moment in that the speech I made to the delegates was that as I walked onto the stage, I see a Smith faction over here, I see a Brown faction there, but what we need to do is turn this into one unit. And when we think of terms of making the PLP one solid organization, I look to the community and I see a black community over here and I see a white community there. So my job, our job over the next period of time is to make out of several one, out of the division in the PLP one, out of the division in the community one. And I think we went some distance down the road in the 3 years I was premier to accomplishing that. I think the PLP were in danger of failing if they didn't resolve that divide at that time. And I think that the country was very much at sixes and sevens at that time. And when I left, the economy was in probably one of its best positions, not just about from my efforts, but from a consortium of initiatives. I think the PLP was in a better position when I left, not just because of me, but because I think they had time to take a deep breath, reevaluate where they were, and what came out of it was at least a more unified approach to governance than before. So that's probably one of the main successes. I could go into policy initiatives, and we might touch upon them as we go on. But that, I think, will be, in my way of thinking, the main contribution I made to both. My wife puts it this way: you not only served the PLP party, you not only served the country, but you served both party and country inside and outside. And we did reach out to the Caribbean and bring Bermuda a little closer to the CARICOM participants, and vice versa. So it was a short period, but I think an important period, at least looking back on the role we played at that time.
Critical role indeed, and recognizing the importance of bringing, the necessity of bringing different factions together. That's no easy feat. That is a major accomplishment, sir. Absolutely. So the country is indebted to you, not just the party, but the country. Premier, did you want to say something to that?
I smiled because when I was nominated to be the candidate to challenge, in this case, Dr. Brown, because Dame Jennifer had, she was Jennifer Smith, stepped down. It was a 10-10. 10 folks in the parliamentary group supported Dr. Brown, 10 folks in the parliamentary group supported, 9 supported myself, until this one person said, and this is why I smiled, she said, "Alec, you ain't much, but you're all that we got." So it was a mixed bag that I inherited. It wasn't universal that I was going to be the savior.
Well, your sense of humor, I'm sure, has served you well throughout your many challenges. First took over as premier, from what I recall, we were facing, I believe, an environmental challenge. Fabian. Tell us how you dealt with and approached that.
Fabian occurred within 2 to 3 weeks of my taking office. I had a leg up. I had an advantage. Prior to being premier, I was Minister for Works and Engineering. Works in engineering is responsible for the infrastructure of the country. So when Fabian, in a devastating, historic manner, tore Bermuda apart, it was for us to rebuild it in the most efficient and shortest period of time. Open up the airport, rebuild the causeway, get the roads cleared. You know the drill that we go through after hurricanes here in Bermuda. But it did something else. I inherited the premiership at a stormy period in the PLP politics. And Fabian became, if you remember your Berkeley literature curriculum syllabus, Fabian became what they call a deus ex machina. It became a device that as we worked to rebuild Bermuda, I could call upon all of the energies of the PLP and the country to work together. So the divide I found in the PLP and the divide in the country literally dissolved over a period of 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, as we had a common goal. And out of that came social agenda, out of that came initiatives, out of that came momentum for us to go forward. And for a period, my poll numbers went up 60, 70, 75%. And in actual fact, I remember sitting with Mr. Drinkwater, the cabinet secretary, and saying, listen, I have political capital. High poll numbers I'm referring to as political capital. I want to use this political capital to take the penultimate challenge and step towards sovereignty, towards independence. And I had that conversation with both the party, I had that conversation with my parliamentary group, and so in Founders Day of 2004 in the PLP, I launched the move to discuss sovereignty, to discuss independence. So yes, Fabian was a challenge, but Fabian became an opportunity also from a political point of view.
Absolutely. And I like that attitude of taking something that's a challenge and using it as an opportunity to achieve. What would you say with regard to Fabian, how you helped to bring the people together?
I was basically just a facilitator. We had to come. The regiment was brilliant. The Bermuda Regiment was brilliant. In actual fact, so much so that the esprit de corps that the ranks demonstrated allowed me to go to the UK, and when Cayman, I think I'm right, Cayman had another hurricane event. The chief minister, the not premier there at that time, the chief minister asked if the regiment could come down to Cayman and assist in clearing up and assisting in rebuilding their infrastructure. Within maybe a year's time, Grenada had a devastating storm. Now, this became tricky. Grenada is an independent country, sovereign country. I offered our services to the Grenadian government because the regiment were that good. And the governor of the day here was not so inclined. And it became a case of a conversation, let's put it this way, between myself and the head of the regiment, who then had a discussion with the governor that it was decided that, well, maybe it could be done. Even though we were a colonial territory, they were a sovereign entity. Remember, I suggested that we brought Bermuda and the Caribbean closer together through CARICOM, and it became a CARICOM initiative for Bermuda Regiment to come and go to Grenada. And I can remember Colonel Lamb. We spent a whole day putting a elementary school back together. And it was so hot. It was so hot in Grenada. The roof had been taken off of the school. They were using tin covering material that the regiment man could only go up on the roof and work for 15 minutes because after that the boots began to melt. Yet there was one young man who had gone down to Grenada. They had to literally drag him into the regiment. He didn't want to have any part of it. But once he had that experience there, he said, I spoke to the ranks when I arrived and while I was there, and he said, Premier, I wasn't interested in serving in the regiment, but I certainly am interested in serving people down here. And now I see that there's a world outside of Bermuda. Now I see that I wasn't on a good path at home, and the regiment has been instructive, educational, a lesson in life to me. So the Fabian storm beget the Cayman experience, beget the Grenadian expedition, beget a lesson to all of us. And I did an interview in Grenada, and I said, while children here and people here don't know us in Bermuda, we're thousands of miles away, but we're neighbors that you just haven't met. We are friends who live in different geographical locations, but we're brothers and sisters all, and that we have common challenges, common needs. And one thing, and I can end on this note, that school didn't have lights any brighter than we have here. That school was benches, no air conditioning, of course, just windows cut out. But I asked some of the youngsters, what do you want to be when you matriculate, when you finish? One said, I want to be a chess player. Another said, I want to be a prime minister. Another said, I want to be a doctor. They were creating young doctors, lawyers, cricketers, sportsmen, in conditions that people here were fighting me over building this school. Bermuda had so much, and in many ways we were producing so little. They had so little, and were trying to produce so much. And in that, it was a lesson to me that we have to look inward at what we have, not what we don't have, what we have. And thus the notion of us working together, coming together under one umbrella, an independent sovereign nation, Bermuda could produce so much more. The talent here is extraordinary. But if you don't see yourself as somebody, if you don't see yourself with a common goal, in actual fact, independence is not a case of being an anti-Britain initiative. It is a pro-Bermudian policy approach. And everywhere in the world now, America, UK, Caribbean, Africa, have become interdependent as opposed to independent. Everybody works now in one way or the other in conjunction with another government. So it's not a case of we can't do it alone. Independence and sovereignty is not about going alone. But when our parliament is subject to another parliament, we are not free. You can't be half free like you can't be half pregnant. You either are or you aren't. And so we are not the full-blooded democracy that I think we could be, should be, and must be someday.
Powerful, Premier, powerful. That story is so poignant. And there are so many lessons coming out of that. And it's interesting that you moved to independence, because that's one of the things that I got from that story of how those different entities in those different countries were able to do. And they looked to Bermuda.
Yes.
And the idea that we can help not just ourselves, but other countries says we can. So what do you think is our holdback in not going independent? Because as you rightly put it, it wouldn't just be independence. There's an interdependence between nations, the United States, England, France. There is that interdependence. What's holding us back from going the full distance and claiming our sovereignty?
We built the walls of our own prison, in that it hasn't happened by happenstance. I'll save you the history lesson, but it was in the interest of the landed gentry who ran Bermuda for hundreds of years to keep their enslaved population from joining up with those blacks to the south. I simplify it. Bermudians, until recently, maybe they don't do it now, used to say, those people down south, that was their sisters and brothers. Folks came from the islands to help build the dockyard. Some of our finest educators came from the Caribbean. But it had been an interest to keep the blacks here from looking to the blacks elsewhere. I think that position has passed, that position is passing, but the notion of going it alone, they used to say, well, you're so well off here in Bermuda, do you want to be like the people in Jamaica? Do you want to be like the people in the Caribbean? And my answer is yes. But my wife is from Jamaica. I went to Jamaica in the late 60s, early 70s. I attended university in America, but when I landed in Jamaica, I had a most extraordinary experience. Everybody in the airport was Black Jamaican. Everybody in the banks were Black Jamaicans. Everybody in the police force, military. And suddenly, for the first time, I was in a black country, and they were running the country. The airport we had here was an American base. The airport they had there was their country, their land. They ran it. They decided the policy. And all of a sudden, what my AME pastor used to say to us in Sunday school, you are somebody. And he used to say it to all of us youngsters, you are somebody. And over a while, after time, it began to take root. Then came the civil rights movement in the US. And Jesse Jackson was saying, "You are somebody." And then came James Brown, Black and Proud. Then came the Black movement, civil rights movement in the U.S. Say it loud, you're black and you're proud. And here in Jamaica, I saw the manifestation of what they were singing about, preaching about, talking about, sermonizing. And so the notion that it was an us here in Bermuda and a them in the Caribbean was nonsense. The Gibbons family had businesses here and they were making money in the Bahamas. Suddenly I realized that if it worked corporately, certainly it could work politically. And so therefore the commitment to setting up BIC, Bermuda's Independent Commission, came mandatory. And I made a chairman, Pastor Lamb, Dr. Lamb, because I thought the movement not only had to be ecumenical, naively, I thought, make it non-political. Let it be not headed by someone who had a political hat, but someone had the charisma, the intellect, the intelligence, and the ability to reach out to all Bermudians. I told you I had very high poll numbers when I first became premier, 60, 70. Mr. Drinkwater warned me when I said that I said, I'm going to use this political capital to launch our move to sovereignty. He said, Premier, those numbers will fall. I said, well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I'm not just going to sit here on what we call my political capital. I'm going to use it. So said, so done. I had been invited out to just about everybody's home and everybody's club and everybody's social event before I mentioned independence. Once I started talking about independence, it started to melt away. The support from the white community became thin. Positive comments about Alex Scott as premier became less and less, even in the black community, because again, the concept of this little island going it alone, we've been made to believe that it is a mission impossible. It is a mission that is mandatory. If we are going to take that next step, if we are going to realize the true empowerment, not only of the black community, but of this community. If we're going to think in terms of interdependence, then Bermuda has demonstrated the financial sector here in Bermuda is one of the most exceptional, if one of the strongest in reinsurance. And that can be one of the limbs of our economic viability, globally speaking, and that will serve the country. It's again, we are somebody here. I look at the youngsters now and what they're doing things, they're participating, they have careers that they were imaginary when I was coming along. So we're stepping in the right direction, but we have going to have to step with purpose, direction, and guidance and leadership to take that next step. I sat on the Pitt Commission, which was a royal commission called after the assassination of a police commissioner, assassination of a governor, then the hanging of Boris and Tatlin. I mentioned that to say that when we were deliberating, I wrote a paper, The Psyche of Dependency, and that was one of the moving, I think, arguments amongst the commissioners that led to the last paragraph in the Pitt Royal Commission report that all of the commissioners signed off on the notion of Bermuda considering a move to sovereignty, because a move away from the psyche of dependency. And I think that when we take on that challenge, and we will, when we go it as an independent territory, and we will, then I think we'll realize for the first time, the very first time, that we as a little country out here are somebody. And our youngsters will feed on that. Even if you're away from these shores, you'll long for being back home. That's when there becomes a bond between a man and a woman and the country. And that national esprit de corps, it can't be measured, but it certainly can fuel, I think, the determination to make a educational facility like Berkeley more productive, make our institutions more effective, because we'll have a purpose, a common purpose.
Yes, that we can all rally around, absolutely. And you witnessed that esprit de corps when you visited Jamaica.
Yes.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
it is possible.
Yes.
As you reflect, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to consider is your legacy as Premier Alex Scott?
I have a circle of close friends, and one friend said that he had been approached by somebody, said, "Alex Scott's your mate, isn't he?" So I said, "Yeah, you could say that." He says, "You know, that boy is so honest that is stupid." And by that, I think he was referring to the fact that Mr. Wade, Fred Wade, used to talk about whiffums. I said, "Fred, what's whiffums?" He says, "Too many people go into politics because they want to find out what's in it for me." I had the very fundamental approach to politics. I didn't go in to be a parliamentarian, but once in, the service of self to the public was paramount. Being honest about your commitment, most important, the integrity in which you serve. Let that be your banner, your hallmark, the way that folks measure you. Because if they respect you, they will follow you. If they follow you, then you want them to basically not be caught up into your politics, but be caught up into your commitment to both country and community. So to a parliamentarian, I say, you big up the country before you big up yourself. And hopefully, if there's anyone who writes my epitaph across that gravestone, they can just put, "He cared." That'll suffice.
Premier Scott, You are highly respected as an elder statesman. What advice would you give to our young people to encourage them to get involved in politics?
The notion of getting into politics is a recent phenomenon for young Bermudians. I take part of the blame or responsibility in that one of the things I did intentionally when I was premier was that I took on the unpopular notion of raising the salary of cabinet ministers and consequently the whole parliamentary caucus, and I mean both sides, parliamentarians, to make it not only attractive, but to make it practically possible for them to serve. In the 40s, when I was coming along, the wealthy rent Parliament. They rented from Parliament, they rented from the yacht club. They then took care of themselves by the decisions they made in Parliament, and the decisions they made in the yacht club allowed them to have their businesses, so they made their living. If we were to get our young, educated university grads into Parliament, they had to be able to sustain themselves. So the salaries they have now won't make them rich, but it will make them able to share their time with community service and with their familial and their career responsibilities. But, important but, remember Fred Wade's WIFMs. They should not be doing it for what's in it for me. I'm not too sure who told me. I'm not too sure where I got it from. But the more authority you have, the less you use it. What do I mean by that? Your name is premier. Everybody says yes, sir, no, sir, three bigs, full, sir. But if you interact with your colleagues, with the community, with mutual respect, the authority that you have, you don't say, do this, do that because I say so. By example, you make it such that you're not working for me, we are working together. We are not working for ourselves, we are working for the community. And I found that when I worked with my administrative assistant, she came in earlier and she left later, because now it was us doing a job and not me telling her that that's the job she had to do. When we worked together, she contributed her skill set and it combined with what I had to offer and put on the table. And that worked throughout the community. Matter of fact, I noticed it today here, and I've noticed it elsewhere. Folks say, Sir Alec. I'm not Sir. Haven't been knighted. But if you earn the respect of the community you serve, they big you up without you going around sticking your chest out. If they feel that you are doing it for the people, then the people do something for you. And that's what I say to our young folks. Don't lose your way. Don't be blinded by that title. Bermuda, all of Bermuda could be put in Wembley Stadium, so you're not so important when it comes to numbers. heads of corporations have more responsibility than you as the head of a government here. That's not putting you down, that's putting you into the picture that put it into perspective. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. One day I was sitting behind the desk in the Premier's office, and it occurred to me, there are many things that you have done that have fallen short of what you intended. But the one thing that I comforted myself with, I had done the best I could with what I had, and I could ask no more of myself than that. The knock came to the door, not that day, but the knock came to the door one day, and Roberta Rowland, she was my administrative assistant, she came in and said, "Premier, you got a minute?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "Someone would like to see you." And this man, senior citizen, came in, a lady, a petite, diminutive lady. And she said, "Premier, I was going by, and I said, let me go see him." And I thought immediately, oh, she's going to ask for something for her club, something for her church. She said, "Can I ask you something?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Can we pray together for a few minutes?" I was taken aback. Obviously agreed. She said a prayer. If you were to characterize it, it was to say, "Lord, help this man out because he needs help." And then she finished and left. And I was so moved. But I was moved because I realized, at least in some way, somehow, I had been able to reach out and make her feel that she could walk in and spend a moment with the Premier. And more importantly, she felt she could walk in, spend a moment with the Premier, and call upon the Lord to help this poor soul. Meaning, there was a bond, there was a human bond, there was a link, there was a moment, there was a feeling somehow created between the office of Premier and this wonderful, wonderful lady. And if the young folks can try to make that type of link with the public they serve, that public will serve them as a citizenry like none other. And that's where you get your strength. That's where you get your power. That's where you get your ability to see policies through. If you basically let folks know that you are about serving them. No nonsense about, well, I can't share this information with you because it is sacrosanct. It is private. You wouldn't understand. And the other thing, because I was in public relations, I make this point. One day, out of many days, the Royal Gazette wrote a story that really ticked me off. And I said, "Look, Ms. Brown Evans, we should sue these unmentionable name people." She said, No. She says, "You will not find justice in the courts. Our forum is in Parliament. We make the laws in Parliament that set a fair play, a level playground in the community. Don't look for justice in the court. Look for the justice in the system that we are able to set up. And a point made by her and lesson learned by me, that in actual fact, Parliament can be a powerful forum if you use it judiciously. The more power you have, the less you use it punitively to make Bermuda a better place. Recently I heard somebody say, you know, we're doing this because they did it, now it's our chance to do it. We went into Parliament so that we could change the things they were doing. We shouldn't be in there now saying it's our time. No, it's our responsibility, not time. It's our responsibility to now do the things that we said we didn't want. And maybe, just maybe, this is where the rub. The young folks aren't aware of the history of how we got there. They aren't aware of the raison d'etre, the reason that we fought 30 years, 40 years for Parliament. And in actual fact, there are some unsung heroes in the march to empowerment of the Progressive Labour Party. It's the families behind the men and women who are up front. That's where the sacrifice is made. The children are teased in school. The wives miss out on anniversaries. The time that you should spend playing football with your son or spending time with your daughter, they lose out. And so I think the unsung heroes in the parliamentary process, especially in Bermuda, are the families that make that sacrifice. My wife was a partner, mother, and lover. Wait, did I say lover?
You did. Maybe you should start with that.
Yes, I should have put it in the right perspective. My wife was the lover, mother, and partner. That's another story, another interview. But I wasn't easy to live with. All skin teeth, not laugh. I smile up front, but behind the scenes, I get very serious. And I'm not an outgoing person. I'm rather shy. But my wife puts it all in balance. She sets me straight. She sets me right. They say, watch out for a Jamaican wife when she starts boiling rice. Well, that's another story too. Several times my wife got so angry she started boiling rice, and I knew what happens next. No, the point is that your family circle is so very important to your public persona. And I have been blessed with a Christian wife, a highly capable wife, was able to sit down and say, I know what you want to accomplish, but don't lose your way. And she recalls one day I came home, early days, just set up the business, just set up Scott Crofts Limited. And I said, damn, we were supposed to get that account, but I know that just because she said, don't bother with it. Don't bother with it. I said, well, I tell you one thing. If I can't make it in Bermuda, I'm going to change Bermuda. And at that point she said, no, we'll change Bermuda. She always managed to make me see that we were in this politics together. She does not like politics, but it was a we. And so many times I will not go out in public and talk about I did this, I did that. It's we. And it's because not only not only because my family was behind me, my wife was behind me, my colleagues were with me. No one man, no one parliamentarian can do it alone. If he does, he's a fool. Because if you make yourself the center of attention, the public will descend on you, and then you will. It's one day they're saying Hosanna, the next day they're saying crucify him. And I'll end on this note. The PLP won in 1998, after 30 years of toiling in the field. And it was about 12:30, 1 even. We had been at PLP headquarters just enjoying the moment of victory. And some of the younger folks had been there and then around us, joining in. And then I noticed that one person was missing. A young lady was missing. And I hope I can get through this story. I said, "Where is so-and-so?" They said, "Oh, she's left." And so we went back to talking, bigging it up, what we were going to do as government. And within about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, she was back. I said, where you been, Cha?" And she said, "I went to the graveyard." And I said, I said to my father's grave, "Dad, your party has won." Those meetings that you attended, all of those debates that you had, they paid off. You did it. They won. You won. And I realized then that any accomplishment we have, we stand on the shoulders of others who have gone before. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of people that we should not diminish by now doing something for ourselves. This is serious business. If you're in it for yourself, get out. Do the service to the country to get out. If you're in it to serve, be an example to others. We need more, much more. And this is not about black families. This is not about white families. It's not about rich families. It is about the family of Bermuda. And we're back now to the notion that if we band together, this little piece of geography in the Atlantic, if we band together, there ain't nothing that we can't accomplish. And collectively, we'll be somebody.
Poignant. Premier, I have tears in my eyes. That story and all that you shared. The partnership that you enjoyed and still enjoy with your wife and her support, and the whole notion of it's we and not them and us. It's a we. And that young lady who beautifully recognized that we stand on the shoulders of giants. It's been my pleasure. I'm tearing up. But thank you, sir. Thank you for your advice, because that advice is not just for future aspiring politicians. It's advice that all of us can take to heart if we want to see a better community in Bermuda.
Thank you.
Sir, we honor you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Premier Scott, for your wisdom and your inspiration. We have just finished our conversation with former Premier Alex Scott, and we are grateful for all that he has shared. We will continue this series, and we will chat with other former premiers of Bermuda. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us again.